Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ha-Jun Kim from Cultural Sydney, and I'll be your host for today's Korea-Australia Green New Deal webinar. Just one quick note before I start speaking in Korean. There is translation service down below on the screen. Please select English or Korean, and today's webinar will be translated to you for those who need translation. 안녕하십니까? 2021년 한호 그린뉴딜 협력 웨비나의 진행을 맡은 코트라 시드니 무역관의 김하중입니다. 오늘 웨비나에 참석해주신 모든 분들께 감사드립니다. 오늘 이 자리는 한국과 호주 간 신재생 에너지 산업의 협력을 강화하고자 마련되었습니다. 오늘 행사를 공동으로 개최해주신 주 호주 대한민국 대사관에도 진심으로 감사의 말씀 올립니다. 본 웨비나는 동시 통역 서비스가 제공됩니다. 통역을 희망하시는 분께서는 줌 화면 오른쪽 하단에 있는 통역 기능을 선택하시고 동시 통역 서비스를 이용해 주시기 바랍니다. 연사분들의 발표는 사전 녹화된 영상으로 진행이 됩니다. 발표 시간은 약 10분에서 20분 사이입니다. 질문이 있으신 경우에는 Q&A에 질문을 남겨주시기 바랍니다. 추후 연사들에게 답변을 받아 보내드리겠습니다. 그럼 본격적인 시작에 앞서 코트라 손수득 부사장님의 개회사가 있겠습니다.
안녕하십니까. 코트라 부사장 손수득입니다. 바쁘신 가운데 한호 그린뉴딜 웨비나 및 투자 IR 행사에 참여해 주신 모든 분들께 감사드립니다. 2021년은 한국과 호주 수교 60주년이 되는 특별한 해입니다. 양국은 지난 60년간 함께 지속적인 성장을 이뤘습니다. 1965년 500만 달러에 불과했던 교역액은 2020년 250억 달러로 5,000배나 증가하였습니다. 올해 9월까지의 교역액도 지난해보다 65%나 증가한 293억 달러로 양국의 교역은 코로나19 여파에도 빠른 속도로 회복하고 있습니다. 최근 한국과 호주는 탄소 중립이라는 새로운 목표를 가지고 협력해 나가고 있습니다. 지난 10월 정상회담에서 양국은 한호 탄소 중립 기술 파트너십 성명을 공동으로 발표하고 앞으로 청정수소와 암모니아의 공급, 수소 연료 전지차, 탄소 포집 활용 및 저장 기술 등 탄소 중립 기술 전반에 걸친 협력을 할 예정입니다. 호주는 태양광, 풍력, 수력 자원을 바탕으로 그린 수소 생산을 위한 최적의 자연 조건을 가지고 있으며 2050년까지 전체 수소 생산량의 75%를 수출하는 수소 수출국으로의 전환을 계획하고 있습니다. 이를 위해 호주 정부는 2030년까지 1kg당 수소 생산 가격을 2호주 달러 미만으로 낮춰 경쟁력을 확보할 예정입니다. 한국은 2020년 7월 그린 뉴딜 정책을 발표하며 탄소 중립 경제로의 전환을 준비하고 있습니다. 에너지 수입 의존도가 93.5%에 달하는 한국은 호주로부터 청정 에너지를 조달하여 수소 차량, 연료전지 등의 강점을 바탕으로 수소경제 생태계를 만들 수 있습니다. 오늘 개최되는 그린뉴딜 협력 웨비나가 양국의 협력 확대를 위한 좋은 출발점이 되기를 기대합니다. 탄소 중립이라는 양국 공동의 목표를 가지고 수소경제 생태계를 같이 만들기 위한 협업을 시작할 때입니다. 오늘 웨비나에 참석하신 모든 분들의 건강과 성공을 기원드립니다. 감사합니다.
네, 부사장님 말씀 감사드립니다. 이어서 오늘 행사의 공동 주최를 맡아주신 강정식 주 호주 대한민국 대사님의 축사가 있겠습니다.
내외기빈 여러분, 그리고 양국 경제인 여러분, 오늘 한호 그린뉴딜 협력 세미나 및 투자 AR 개최를 진심으로 축하드립니다. 온라인 웨비나로 개최되어 다소 아쉬움이 있습니다만 어려운 여건 속에서도 공무원 행사를 알차게 준비해 주신 행사 관계자 여러분께 깊은 감사의 말씀을 전합니다. 양국 경제인 여러분, 올해는 한 호주 수교 60주년이 되는 해입니다. 양국은 지난 1961년 외교관계를 수립한 이래 자유민주주의와 시장경제 가치를 공유하면서 정치, 경제, 인적교류 등 제반 분야에서 우호 협력 관계를 꾸준히 확대 발전시켜 왔습니다. 호주는 한국전쟁 당시 17,000여 명을 파병한 우리 혈맹이며 그간 한국과 G7, G20, APEC 등 국제무대에서 긴밀히 협력해 왔습니다. 코로나로 주춤했던 양국 간 교역은 올해 9월 현재 총교역액 294억 미불로 작년 249억 불은 물론 팬데믹 이전인 2019년 전체 교역액 285억 불을 이미 넘어섰습니다. 또한 양국 간 경제협력의 범위도 더 넓어지고 깊이도 더 깊어지고 있습니다. 전통적인 에너지 자원 협력은 수소, 재생에너지, 핵심 광물 등 기후변화 4차 산업혁명 시대의 필수적인 신에너지 분야로 확대 발전되고 있으며 인프라 분야에서도 시드니 뉴 이너시티 플리트 프로젝트, 멜번 노스 이스트 링크 사업 등 호주의 대규모 건설 사업에 우리 기업의 참여가 증가하고 있습니다. 방산 분야에서도 한국이 K9 자주포와 레드백 장갑차를 중심으로 양국 간 협력이 더욱 긴밀해지고 있습니다. 양국 경제인 여러분, 전 세계는 지금 기후 공급망 위기라는 큰 도전에 직면해 있습니다. 기후변화는 에너지, 산업, 기업 활동 전반에서, 공급망 위기는 국제관계와 교역구조 분야에서 우리에게 근본적인 변화와 혁신을 요구하고 있습니다. 한호 양국은 이러한 전환기 위기를 오히려 성장과 발전의 기회로 만들기 위해 상호협력을 더욱 강화하고 있습니다. 양국 정상은 지난 6월 G7 정상회의 계기에 양국 관계를 포괄적 협력 동반자 관계로 격상시키기로 합의하고 지난 G20 정상회의 계기에는 탄소 중립 기술 파트너십을 체결함으로써 양국이 경제협력 지평을 수소, 재생에너지 등 그린 산업 분야로 확대해 나가기로 했습니다. 양국이 그린뉴딜 분야 협력 정책도 매우 밝습니다. 정부와 기업이 강력한 정책 추진과 협력 의지가 그 이유입니다. 한국은 작년 7월 인프라, 산업, 에너지 등 경제 사회 전반의 녹색 전환을 추진하는 그린뉴딜 정책을 발표하고 2050 탄소 중립 선언, 수소 선도국가 비전 발표 등 후속 정책을 야심차게 추진하고 있습니다. 포스코, 현대 등 유수의 한국 기업들도 2030년까지 그린 수소 분야에 총 43조 원을 투자하기로 하는 등 기업들이 녹색 전환 투자도 본격적으로 추진되고 있습니다. 호주도 최근 2050년 탄소 중립을 공식적으로 채택하고 수소, 저탄소 기술 등의 정부, 민간이 125억 호불을 투자하기로 하였습니다. 호주 전역에서 7곳의 수소 허브를 구축하여 대규모 수소 수출 산업을 육성하고 연료전지, 전기차 충전 인프라 구축, 저탄소 발전 등 기존 산업 에너지 전반의 녹색 전환도 착실히 추진할 예정입니다. FMG, 우드사이드, 오리진 등 호주 유수의 기업들도 그린 스틸, 그린 수소, 그린 암모니아 등 저탄소 기술 분야의 투자를 과감하게 확대하고 있습니다. 양국 경제인 여러분, 기후변화 시장은 2030년 26조 원에 달하고 탄소 중립 달성에는 2050년까지 130조 달러 투자가 필요하다고 합니다. 이후에 탄소 국경 조정제도 도입 계획 등 전 세계적으로 확산되는 그린 경제 전환 추세에 뒤처질 경우 기업들은 글로벌 밸류체인에서 경쟁 우위를 상실할 수 있습니다. 이런 관점에서 호주와 한국이 상호 보완적인 경제 구조와 그간 굳건한 협력 관계를 바탕으로 그린뉴딜 분야에서 세계를 선도하는 협력 관계를 구축하는 것은 선택이 아닌 필수라고 할 것입니다. 오늘 이 자리가 양국이 그린뉴딜 분야에서 구체적인 프로젝트를 발굴하고 상호 투자를 모색하는 소중한 자리가 되기를 진심으로 기원합니다. 감사합니다.
네, 대사님 좋은 말씀 감사드립니다. 이어서 본격적으로 첫 번째 세션을 시작하겠습니다. 첫 번째 세션은 한국과 호주의 그린 산업 현황에 대해 알아보는 시간입니다. 첫 발표는 한국 수소융합 얼라이언스인 H2 코리아의 김성복 단장님께서 한국 수소산업의 개황 및 강점에 대해 발표해 주시겠습니다.
Good morning. My name is Seongbok Kim, CEO of H2 Korea. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to all distinguished guests for your active interest in the hydrogen economy and participation today. I'm glad to introduce current status and strategy of Korea hydrogen economy. For those of you who are not familiar with us yet, I would like to take some time to introduce H2 Korea. H2 Korea is a public-private consultative body established to support early transition to a hydrogen economy. We are carrying out various tasks that lead the Korean hydrogen economy with more than 120 public and private partners. As we are fully aware, the world is facing serious environmental problems today, and we struggling to tackle these problems by achieving carbon neutrality. In October last year, President Moon declared carbon neutrality as one of the national visions and selected 10 key technologies to achieve it. As it is one of the most important global trends, other major countries are working on their own nationally determined contributions. And hydrogen is considered as one of the most suitable strategies. In this context, Korea is one of the most active participants to realize the hydrogen economy. Korea has been making great efforts to transition to a hydrogen society. In January 2019, the Korean government announced the hydrogen economy roadmap and identified hydrogen as a key engine of economic growth. Along with initiating the roadmap, world's first hydrogen law was enacted in February last year and came into effect this February to accelerate hydrogen economy in Korea. Recently, President Moon vowed to future push hydrogen economy initiatives at the event spotlighting Korea's hydrogen energy vision and policy. From now on, I will tell you the detail of the hydrogen roadmap. Under the vision of becoming a world leader of the hydrogen economy, the government presented its development strategies and targets across the entire hydrogen value chain. Korea also established long-term and specific targets and presented a clear direction by focusing on the hydrogen utilization sector. In 2018, there were only 14 units of hydrogen refueling stations and 1,800 units of FCVs supplied. These figures are expected to expand to 1,200 hydrogen refueling stations and 6.2 million units in 2040. In this slide, I'd like to point out the central and local government's effort to achieve the target I mentioned in the previous slide. Korean ministries have been allocating more budgets to foster hydrogen economy. The total budget that the ministries allocated for hydrogen sectors was about 180 billion won in 2019 and reached 754 billion won in 2021, which has been fourfolded. Local governments are also developing various hydrogen projects such as hydrogen pilot city, production cluster, R&D specialized city, FCV cluster. In response to the government's large-scale investment plans, private sectors are actively jumping into the hydrogen industries. SK, Hyundai, POSCO, Hanwha, Hyosung, as well as numerous small and medium enterprises announced $36 billion scale investment plans by 2030. To sum up, by 2030, I assure you can clearly see the hydrogen economy in your daily life with private and public throughout the whole value chain of the hydrogen industries. A lot of companies are trying hard to have their portions. For example, Hyundai Motors and Doosan Fuel Cells takes the lead in hydrogen utilization. SK is also actively carrying out the business plan on construction of the world's largest liquefaction plant in Korea. Still, the utilization field seems dominant. However, there are numerous R&D and ongoing demonstration projects which will expand and innovate the hydrogen industries. So, we are expecting more and more players from various areas will engage in soon. Indeed, we are already seeing tangible outcomes thanks to the joint effort of the public and private sector. There were significant achievements mainly in the field of utilization. As you can see, about 18,000 units of FCVs have been supplied and 118 hydrogen refueling stations have been deployed last October. Furthermore, the capacity of the fuel cell power generation exceeded 700 megawatts as of November this year. Along with the effort to expand Korean hydrogen industry, International cooperation is essential for the transition to a global hydrogen economy. We have actively been establishing and expanding a global cooperation network by making considerable effort to find global partners. In September, East Korea signed a joint letter of intent for the inauguration of GHIAA, Global Hydrogen Industry Association Alliance, a coalition among hydrogen and fuel cell associations of 13 countries. We also support Korean companies to enter into a global hydrogen market and to be partnered with companies abroad. In addition, Motie, Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy, recently announced that they now prepare to launch the Clean Hydrogen Trade Initiative to lay the groundwork for cooperation in clean hydrogen certification, trade rules, CO2 storage, and hydrogen prices with more than 10 countries, including Australia. Of course, as I mentioned previously, Australia is one of the most ideal partners. Australia, the world's second coal export, is also accelerating its transition to a hydrogen produce and export, and have a plan to produce iron ore without carbon emissions. Korea is also actively promoting the hydrogen economy by achieving the #1 when it comes to supply of FCVs and different infrastructures. And Korea is eager to establish a strategy of a hydrogen supply chain. That is because it is very important to build a strategic relationship between Korea and Australia. There must be long-term strategies and organizational structures to be discover possible cooperation areas and develop joint projects. To realize the firm connection between two countries, East Korea will be always at the front line of all the efforts. That was all I want to share with you today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
김성복 단장님 발표 감사드립니다. 다음은 한국에너지공단 신재생에너지 정책실의 이수만 과장님 차례입니다. 재생에너지 분야의 한국산업현황과 정책 추진 방향에 대해 발표해 주시겠습니다.
저는 한국에너지공단 신재생에너지 업무를 담당하고 있는 이수만이라고 합니다. 오늘 제가 발표드릴 사항은 한국의 재생에너지 산업 동향과 강점, 그리고 향후 정책 추진 방향에 대해서 말씀을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 발표 순서는 제일 먼저 글로벌 재생에너지 산업 동향을 한번 살펴보고 이에 따라서 우리나라 재생에너지 산업의 현황과 강점에 대해서 말씀을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 이어서 최근 그 재생에너지 산업 경쟁력을 강화하기 위한 정책이 크게 두 가지가 발표가 됐는데 이에 대해서 또 이어서 말씀을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 제일 먼저 글로벌 산업 동향입니다. 먼저 태양광 산업을 먼저 살펴보면은 태양광 밸류 체인이 크게 업스트림인 폴리실리콘, 인고 페이퍼, 그리고 미드스트리밍 셀 모듈, 그리고 다운스트리밍 설치 시공, 크게 세 가지 스트림으로 구성이 되고 있습니다. 그런데 이제 그 2010년대부터 중국 기업이 대규모로 이제 투자를 하고 내수 시장이 이제 빠르게 성장함에 따라 규모의 경제를 확보하게 되었습니다. 그래서 이 표에서 보시다시피 중국이 전체 밸류 체인의 50% 이상을 차지를 하고 있고, 특히 그 인고 페이퍼, 셀, 모듈 부분은 70% 이상의 세계 점유율을 확보하고 있는 상황입니다. 그래서 이제 그 태양광 산업 같은 경우에는 가격 중심으로 시장이 형성이 되어 있는 상황입니다. 이에 따라서 이제 그 주요 국들도 자국 기업하고 시장 보호를 위해서 몇 가지 일련의 조치를 했습니다. 예를 들어서 미국 같은 경우에는 세이프 가드를 발동을 하고, 터키나 대만 같은 경우에는 자국 산업을 보호하고, 그리고 국내 그 제품이 설치가 많이 될 수 있도록 우대 정책을 추진하고 있는 상황입니다. 이어서 풍력 산업을 살펴보면은 풍력계 같은 경우에는 그 베스타스나 지멘스, 지이와 같은 북미 유럽의 기술 경쟁력을 갖춘 기업이 그 세계 시장을 선도를 하고 있는 상황입니다. 특히 현재는 그 5메가와트 규모의 풍력 터빈이 설치가 되고 있는데, 이제 그 선도 기업들은 10메가와트급 이상의 풍력 발전 터빈이나 해상 풍력 중심으로 시장을 계속 그 키워나가고 있는 상황입니다. 그리고 여기에서 중국 기업들도 세계 시장을 빠르게 지금 점유하고 있는 상황입니다. 최근에는 중국 기업 쪽에서 그 풍력 산업 전체 밸류체인을 다 서비스화했는 기업이 나타나면서, 여기도 마찬가지로 그 내수 시장을 바탕으로 중국 기업들이 세계 시장도 빠르게 점유하고 있는 상황입니다. 이와 같은 고민을 바탕으로 한국 정부는 2019년도에 재생에너지 산업 경쟁력 강화 방안을 발표를 했습니다. 경쟁력 강화 방안은 국내 산업을 새로운 성장 동력으로 삼아서 육성을 시키고자 하는 정책이라고 보시면 되고, 크게 세 갈래로 나눠지게 됩니다. 첫 번째는 시장 구도를 전환하는 것에 있습니다. 앞서 말씀드렸다시피 태양광 분야는 시장 구도가 가격 경쟁 구도로 지금 진행이 되고 있습니다. 그래서 이 부분을 제품의 효율과 품질 기반으로 시장 경쟁 구도를 전환하고자 하려고 하고 있습니다. 그래서 지금 시행되고 있는 이제 제도들인데, 태양광 발전 모듈 최저 소비 효율제를 도입을 해서 일정 효율 이상을 가진 제품만 국내에서 유통되게 한다든가, 탄소 인증제를 추진을 해서 태양광 모듈이나 뭐 풍력 터빈 이와 같은 설비에서 발생되는 온실가스 배출량을 평가를 해서 온실가스 배출이 적은 제품을 우대하는 정책 등을 지금 추진을 하고 있습니다. 그리고 이 탄소 인증제는 현재 태양광 발전 모듈에만 적용이 되고 있고, 향후 다른 재생에너지 설비에도 적용하는 방안을 지금 검토를 하고 있는 상황입니다. 두 번째는 산업 생태계 경쟁력의 확대입니다. 풍력 같은 경우에는 절대적으로 지금 내수 시장이 부족하기 때문에 내수 시장을 확보하고, 그 다음에 기술과 격차를 좁히기 위한 정책을 추진 중에 있습니다. 예를 들어서 권역별로 실증단지를 구축을 하고, 그 실증단지에서 업체가 R&D를, 기술 개발, R&D를 할 수 있고, 트랙 레코드를 쌓아가면서 기술 경쟁력을 확보할 수 있도록 하고 있습니다. 마지막으로는 해외 진출의 촉진입니다. 우리나라 산업 대다수가 수출 주도형으로 이루어지고 있고, 재생에너지 산업 분야도 거의 유사한 상황입니다. 그래서 글로벌 국가에 맞는 적합한 해외 진출 전략을 지원을 하고 있는 상황입니다. 예를 들어서 동남아시아 권역 같은 경우에는 ODA나 FS 지원을 통해서 그 재생에너지 산업이 연계에 진출할 수 있도록 지원을 하고 있고, 북미나 유럽 같이 그 성숙된 시장 같은 경우에는 리파워링 시장을 그 전략적으로 공략하는 방법 등을 지금 지원을 하고 있습니다. 간략하게 이 좀 산업과 관련된 내용을 좀 설명을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 이번 신재생 에너지 기본 계획은 특이하게 그 두 가지 파트로 지금 구분이 되어 있습니다. 첫 번째 파트는 34년까지의 이제 일반적인 계획이 담겨 있고, 두 번째 파트에서는 2050년 탄소 중립을 달성하기 위한 핵심 과제들을 제시를 했습니다. 지금까지 한국의 재생에너지 산업 동향과 그리고 향후 정책 방향에 대해서 말씀을 드렸습니다. 호주와 이번 기회를 통해서 많은 재생에너지 분야를 발전하기 위한 부분들이 논의되는 것이 바람직할 것으로 보입니다. 감사합니다.
이수만 과장님 감사합니다. 다음은 호주의 그린 산업에 대해 알아볼 차례인데요. 호주 청정에너지 금융공사인 CEFC의 수소 부문 총괄을 맡고 있는 루퍼트 말로니 님께서 호주의 수소 신재생 에너지 투자 현황에 대해 발표해 주시겠습니다.
Hello everyone, my name is Rupert Maloney. I'm from the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. I'm leading the hydrogen platform at the CEFC, and I'm here to do a brief overview of CEFC's role in the Australian hydrogen industry. I'm going to start off with a brief overview of the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, and then I will go on to our role in the hydrogen market here in Australia. So the Clean Energy Finance Corporation is Australia's green bank. We are funded by the federal government here in Australia, and we're actually the largest green bank in the world. We're a specialist clean energy financier. So we're a financier, we're an investor. We invest either debt or equity in the clean energy sector. We've got a proven track record. We've been investing for the last 8 or 9 years across Australia. We're independently run, so we sit independent of the government. We have an independent board of directors that make all investment decisions. But as I said, we're backed by the Australian government with $10 billion in capital that we're investing. We provide tailored financial solutions across renewable energy, energy efficiency, and low emission technology. But we're also investing with a policy purpose. So we're focused on decarbonisation of the Australian energy sector through clean energy investments. As can be seen here, as I mentioned before, we have a strong track record where we have currently around about $6.5 billion of investments out the door, but it's a perpetual fund. So the reason that it's sort of flatlining there is because we're getting a number of investments that are getting repaid, and they're sort of going back out. So we're currently investing about $1.5 billion a year in new investments. We're investing across renewable energy, bioenergy, renewables, hydrogen, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today, built environment across housing, infrastructure, property and manufacturing, and a sustainable economy. So we're also investing across non-energy emissions like agriculture, asset finance as well, green vehicles, and the resource sector. So what do we look for when we invest? We look at financial outcomes. Any investment we make needs to have a positive financial return on a risk-adjusted basis. We look at emissions reductions. So we're looking at any investment we make, the policy purpose is to reduce emissions. And we also look at market impact. So we're looking to catalyse additional private sector finance to maximise emissions reduction. So I'm leading the charge on hydrogen. We have a specific sub-fund called the Advancing Hydrogen Fund, where we've got $300 million of concessional finance. So we have more flexibility within this Advancing Hydrogen Fund to support and grow a clean, innovative, safe and competitive Australian hydrogen industry. As I mentioned before, we will be using either debt or equity to focus on projects that align with the national hydrogen strategy here in Australia, which was handed down by the federal government and the state and territories a couple of years ago. Eligible projects in the Advancing Hydrogen Fund are essentially projects along the supply chain, but there needs to be an Australian context. So we can invest across renewable energy, electrolyzer technologies, hydrogen supply chains. That's including supply chains to export. and then even end-use applications. So we can certainly finance trucks or green ammonia facilities or export facilities. But as I mentioned before, projects must be commercial. We need to get a commercial return. Although we have some flexibility, as I mentioned, we can get a concessional return, so a lower return than the market. One good Korean example, a recent example of working with Korean sponsors. So when we look at any investment, there must be a complying investment. It needs to be solely or mainly Australian based, but that's not to say we can't support Korean investors here in Australia and projects in Australia. So a recent example is that we supported Korea Zinc, their subsidiary in Australia called Arc Energy Corporation, to finance the first stage of their Sun HQ hydrogen hub in Townsville in Australia. So we recently announced this project where we're financing Arc Energy across electrolyzer, 5 ultra heavy duty fuel cell trucks and refueling infrastructure. So that's a good deal, and it's a good relevant example of supporting a Korean business. And we'll look to support that business and other Korean businesses as they grow their operations here in Australia and ultimately to export back to Korea. So as I mentioned, we're a federal government agency. The federal government here in Australia have other support mechanisms underway. So I've spoken about our Advancing Hydrogen Fund. We work very closely with ARENA. ARENA is the grant giving organisation of the federal government in renewable energy. And so they currently have a hydrogen deployment funding round where they've announced 3 successful projects and they're deploying over $100 million into those projects. So we work closely with ARENA and we're working closely with ARENA on those projects. And then the federal government is also running a hydrogen hubs program, so called the Clean Hydrogen Industrial Hubs program, where they've allocated $464 million. And that program's underway at the moment. We will also look to potentially support some of those hubs through financing. Just really quickly touch upon, we recently did a market study in Australia, which might have some interest. And you can access this market study from our website, but we look to define commerciality levers for hydrogen projects in Australia, which would help us define commerciality sequencing and investment opportunities, all within an Australian context. But we certainly also looked at export as one of those end-use applications and what the economics look like for export into countries like Korea. So quick overview of some of the conclusions of that study. It certainly highlighted that displacing petroleum products, so certainly across transportation or remote power. Here in Australia, there's a number of remote power generation, which is currently being powered by diesel generation. So those sorts of sectors, there's a clear pathway for hydrogen to be commercial, competing against diesel or petroleum products. So it certainly will start in heavy haul, high utilization trucking. For example, the project we just supported that I mentioned. And then it will broaden to other sectors as hydrogen costs come down. But a key challenge, which is also very relevant from a Korean perspective, is truck and bus availability. So I know a number of the Korean manufacturers are manufacturing hydrogen vehicles. I think there's a very buoyant market here in Australia for those businesses to export or import into Australia those vehicles. And as our study showed, some of these projects are close to being commercial, so that's quite exciting. Another area that's a big focus is displacing natural gas or its derivatives. There's certainly there's some of those areas. Hydrogen, there's no real alternatives to hydrogen for decarbonisation, although the economics are really challenging. There's no real alternatives. So I think a lot will happen in those sectors, but there will be large economic gaps, and that's what our report highlighted. So we really do need green hydrogen to come down in cost. And then, as I mentioned, export. We looked at export. It will be a key enabler of a low carbon economy in many markets, including Korea. And I think Australia has a key role to play. We have some real competitive advantages. There's a lot of very large-scale projects which are entering development phase. And I know that some of those projects are targeting Korea to export green hydrogen too. So that's an exciting area. I think those projects will continue to be developed. I think Australia has a competitive advantage to operate. And we'll be using our financing, either debt or equity, but we have a lot of flexibility in our financing, more flexibility than the private sector or the commercial funders. So we'll be using that our financing to support those projects. So to sum up, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, we've got a dedicated focus on hydrogen through the Advancing Hydrogen Fund that I've mentioned. We'll be looking to support any projects, and I welcome anyone reaching out to me if you want to discuss specific hydrogen projects and how we can use our financing to support you. But across the rest of our business, we're also very focused on enabling technologies, which is bringing down the cost of renewable energy will be key for the hydrogen sector. And we're still doing a lot in renewable energy, and we'll continue to do that where there's market gaps and it requires support from the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. We're doing a lot in transitioning industries, and it's part of our hub program, and working on where hydrogen can play a role, but some of those heavy carbon industries. And then we also have an innovation fund, which is essentially a venture capital fund where we will be investing in early stage scale up hydrogen technologies. And we've also already done that, and we'll continue to do that. So together, we're really focused on catalyzing the Australian hydrogen industry. So I'll finish up there. But as I mentioned, please feel free to reach out if anyone wants to discuss any specific hydrogen projects or other clean energy projects. Contact details are here. Thank you.
네, 루퍼트 말로니님 발표 감사드립니다. 다음은 두 번째 세션으로 넘어가겠습니다. 호주 시장의 그린 산업 분야별 현황 및 유망 분야에 대해 알아보는 시간입니다. 먼저 현대자동차 호주 법인의 최고 운영 책임자이신 존 캐트님의 발표가 있겠습니다.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this incredible opportunity to represent Hyundai Motor Company Australia. My name is John Kett, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge His Excellency Mr. Jong Sik Kang, the Ambassador of the Republic of Korea, and thank him for this opportunity. I would also like to thank Kotra for hosting this event today. In the next 15 minutes, let me take you on a journey. It's a journey we are excited to be on, and equally a journey that can't be completed alone. By the end of this presentation, I hope to leave you with three key messages. Firstly, Hyundai Motor Group's vision, Progress for Humanity, is grounded in the belief that we are here to do the right thing by humanity. Secondly, that this vision is underwritten by the group's incredible size and reach, and by an innovative stance that continually reimagines the future of mobility and connecting people with quality time. And finally, that is innovative stance that is authenticated by the deployment of technology into Australia. So let's explore how the Hyundai Motor Group aligns our Progress for Humanity vision to a commitment to do the right thing by humanity.
I expect you to let them breathe.
Saya harap kamu bisa menjaga laut untuk generasi penerus.
Midami, kuurtuta, awartinan dumdiam. Espero que salves nuestro planeta.
We listen to those carrying the biggest responsibility for humanity. We are all expecting Generation 1. The first generation that will live carbon neutral by our efforts against climate change.
Obviously, that's a very powerful video with a clear strategic commitment, a vision born out of progress for humanity, signalling the end of the carbon age and the dawning of Generation 1, strengthening our connection with the consumer and introducing the concept of quality time in the context of zero-emission mobility. All designed to position Hyundai Motor Group as a leading smart mobility service provider. This is the journey we are on. Please come with us, or better still, let us come on your journey with you. The dawn of Generation 1 is clear. Hyundai Motor Group is committed to carbon neutrality by 2045. However, key to any journey are the timeline markers measuring our progress towards our carbon neutrality commitment. By 2025, Hyundai Motor Group will be selling 560,000 battery electric vehicles and 110,000 fuel cell electric vehicles globally. By 2030, our Genesis luxury brand will be fully electrified and only use renewable energy. By 2035, the Hyundai Group will be fully electrified in Europe. Then by 2040, all key markets globally will be fully electric, leading to Hyundai Motor Group achieving carbon neutrality in 2045. Our pathway to becoming a smart mobility service provider is anchored in pursuing two electrification streams: battery electric vehicles and fuel cell electric vehicles powered by hydrogen. Our battery electric vehicle strategy is based on our new electric global modular platform known as EGMP. EGMP is revolutionary in several ways. Ioniq 5, the first group vehicle based on this platform, is the first mainstream vehicle to offer 800-volt ultra-fast charging. That means the car can charge from 10 to 80% in 18 minutes. And it combines that with 451 kilometres range, removing customer anxiety. The battery is secured within an aluminium and ultra-high tensile steel structure, enabling an ANCAP 5-star safety rating. It incorporates V2L technology, vehicle to load, allowing customers to power household appliances from the car. We'll share a little bit more about this in a minute. And the next step will be vehicle to grid technology, coming soon. The platform is also highly flexible and modular. The dedicated chassis can be configured for a passenger car, SUV, or light commercial vehicle. Off-road capability, payloads and towing capacity, so important to Australian customers, will continually evolve as new products are launched off this platform. And the performance capability of existing carbon-emitting vehicles will be replicated or exceeded. Here's a quick demonstration on how this amazing electric vehicle can actually power your weekend. It's a bit of fun, and I hope you enjoy it.
People love to roam and be free, but this means bringing less.
What did you say?
Wait, what? But don't you have to charge everything before you leave the house?
Says who? You don't need to anymore.
To cook while camping, you had to gather wood, make a fire.
That's quite the effort.
Doesn't the sound of nature make you feel more relaxed?
Now it does.
What exactly is going on here? Can someone please fill me in?
Hey! You still don't get it! Do you?
Woo! How is all this even possible?
Shh! You'll find out soon enough.
Initially, the EGMP platform will provide 3 distinct vehicles through 2024. We have just launched the Ioniq 5, a mid-size SUV. It will be followed by the Ioniq 6 passenger car in 2022, with the design inspired by the Prophecy concept shown on the left. And then Ioniq 7, a large 8-seat SUV, will be launched in 2024. It will not stop there. The EGMP platform technology will also support the Genesis EV transition from Q1 2022, when we will launch the new electric Genesis GV60. From electric, we now turn our attention to hydrogen. We don't see a race between electric and hydrogen power. We see them as complementary, and so Hyundai is investing in both. Hyundai's hydrogen fuel cell strategy is yet another electrification pathway to carbon neutrality. This next film will look at the breadth and scope of Hyundai's hydrogen technology powering mobility in a future hydrogen society. Hydrogen offers Hyundai Motor Group a real differentiating technology versus other automotive players. A vision for hydrogen beyond light vehicle mobility, incorporating trucks, buses, trams, and marine applications. It's a vision that sees the next generation of Hyundai fuel cell stacks in 2023 becoming twice as powerful, 30% smaller to improve packaging, and 50% cheaper to continually improve the commercialisation and adoption rate of this technology. A vision that sees full flat fuel cell stacks as zero emission power generators beyond mobility. And this technology is real, it's living, it's breathing. Overseas, we are already helping to build a hydrogen ecosystem in Switzerland. We are providing the world's first fleet of hydrogen trucks to various transport operators. Our Exient trucks have already covered over 1 million kilometres. One truck by itself can save more than 30 tonnes of CO2 compared to an average diesel truck every year. 65 are on the road in Switzerland now, and Hyundai is on track to deploying 1,600 trucks in Switzerland by 2025. And in 2023, another large fleet of Exient trucks will begin operations in California. And by 2028, we will apply hydrogen power to all of our commercial vehicles. This isn't a dream, it's happening and it's expanding today. Beyond the electrification of our platforms, the progress towards becoming a smart mobility service provider continues. Hyundai Motor Group has just recently acquired Boston Dynamics, world leaders in robotics, and has also formed Motional, which is driving a path towards autonomous electric vehicles such as the Ioniq 5 robo-taxi. The key role of Hyundai Motor Company Australia is to position ourselves at the forefront of this global evolution to becoming Australia's leading smart mobility service provider. So let's start talking about our house. This diagram lays out our pathway to carbon neutrality. We won't just talk the talk in Australia, we intend to walk the walk. The outer rings speak to the reducing, replacing, eliminating and removing CO2 emissions. It's a strategy that's contingent on regulations, a commitment to technology deployment, increased consumer adoption rates, and infrastructure availability. It doesn't stop. It's circular because it's a continuous process for Generation 1 and beyond. It focuses on a community-based education and engagement program, recognises the importance of partnerships at all levels, and keeps the carbon neutrality commitment in sight at all times. We will not only deploy the technology, but enact the vision. Now let's explore how we're walking the walk. Hyundai Australia's products, how they're positioned today, and what we are doing going forward. Today, Hyundai is represented by 3 distinct business models. 3 go-to-market strategies engage us with consumers in ways that best suit their preferences. from in-store to online to a luxury concierge sales experience. Each business model is supported by a world-class zero-emission portfolio. Let's take a look at these. In our franchise model, we offer the Hyundai Ioniq first-generation hatch with hybrid, plug-in hybrid and full electric in one common platform. Kona Electric is Hyundai's first EV SUV, and we added a lower-cost standard range Kona EV to the lineup this year. Those two cars occupy first and second place on the federal government's Green Vehicle Guide website. So we're already recognised in Australia as having the most energy-efficient zero-emission cars in the country. And we'll be launching a low-emission Santa Fe hybrid early next year. The new Ioniq 5 is sold online only, with deliveries through our dealer network. This vehicle was launched on October 12th and sold out in 2 hours online. And we've launched the hydrogen Nexo SUV, which we'll touch on a little bit later. Our luxury brand Genesis is a company-owned retail experience. As mentioned previously, Genesis will launch its first EV, the GV60, in Q1 2022. We will launch the electric G80 limousine and an electric SUV very soon. All of these products across all business models launched from mid-2022 will be fully connected car enabled through our new BlueLink technology and Genesis connected services, ushering in the beginning of smart mobility for HMCA customers and partners. So when we talk about leadership, deploying first and winning with partnerships is the way forward. Hyundai Motor Group's Executive Chair, Yu-Song Chung, when speaking about our aspiration for hydrogen said, "Hydrogen for everyone, everything, everywhere." So the spirit of cooperation is sown. Hyundai Motor Company Australia is incredibly well positioned going forward, rapidly expanding and deploying technology as it becomes available. We have a history of partnerships with like-minded innovators. In 2014, we took the bold step of building Australia's first ever hydrogen station for light vehicles at our Macquarie Park headquarters. In that same year, we imported Australia's first hydrogen vehicle, the iX35 fuel cell, shown here. Taking leadership further, in 2018 we launched the Hyundai Nexo, which became the country's first Australian Design Rule approved hydrogen car, and it's 5-star ANCAP safety rated. The car's real-life credentials were put to the test earlier this year. Hyundai set a world distance record for a hydrogen vehicle running on a single tank. The Nexo travelled 887.5 kilometres from Melbourne into the desert on one tank of hydrogen. An amazing demonstration of this technology. It's real, it exists today. Further, in 2021 we deployed 20 Nexos into the ACT government's fleet, served by Australia's first and only commercial green hydrogen refuelling station in Canberra. We also deployed 5 Nexos with the Queensland Government as they prepare to launch their own hydrogen station next year. With more stations coming online, we needed to look at our own backyard. That is what competition and cooperation does. So in 2022, we'll replace our existing hydrogen station with a new state-of-the-art refueler at our Macquarie Park headquarters, generating its own green hydrogen. There's no doubt progress can appear slow at times. However, our enthusiasm and belief is high, and we do recognise we are most certainly on a journey that cannot be completed alone. Adoption rates remain quite low. However, we are determined to deploy our technology into Australia as it comes online. We have seen several state governments adopt the COP26 pledge to phase out the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles by 2040 or earlier. These are encouraging signs in policy development on both state and federal level. The phasing out of carbon-emitting vehicles should not be the sole benefit reserved for customers overseas. Australians deserve the cleanest and best mobility technology, and Hyundai Australia is delivering it. There's so much more to be done, but our vision is clear and our carbon neutrality North Star is crystal clear. And we certainly recognise the power of partnerships. We see industry partners reinventing themselves as zero-emission power generators, and we are looking forward to partnering with them. Our simple call to action today is asking you to speak to us about your emerging zero-emission mobility needs. That is, mobility needs for private customers, green corporate and local, state and federal government fleets. Speak to us about your ability to provide infrastructure support that will expand adoption rates of zero-emission platforms. Speak to us if you see the opportunity we see in evolving areas of connected cars. This is an unexplored opportunity here in Australia. Speak to us if you're looking for further connections into the broader Hyundai Group to better understand our evolving technology beyond light cars. As you can see, we're committed to continually launching the latest technology. We're doing it, we've been the first to do it, and we'll continually outline to you what we are doing for the future of mobility, from robots to buses. At the end, we are simply saying, if you are a kindred spirit, if you see the importance of Generation 1 and progress for humanity in Australia, and you want to start now, then we want to start with you. Why don't you evolve with us now? Thank you very much.
네, 존 캐트님 발표 감사드립니다. 다음 발표 연사는 뉴사우스 웨일스주의 전기 공급사인 트랜스그리드사입니다. 퓨처 그리드 플래닝 업무를 담당하고 계신 제시 스타인펠드 매니저님께서 호주의 에너지 전환 전망에 대해 발표해 주시겠습니다.
Good afternoon. My name is Jesse Steinfeld. I'm the Future Grid Planning Manager at Transgrid. Transgrid is the manager and operator of the high voltage electricity transmission system in New South Wales and ACT. In October this year, Transgrid published our Energy Vision. It's our blueprint for the future of Australia's electricity system. It shows how the electricity sector can support the decarbonisation of the Australian energy system, the economy more broadly, and how it can support Australia in becoming a global clean energy leader. This analysis was done in collaboration with CSIRO, ClimateWorks Australia, and the Brattle Group. Here I'll present to you some of the key insights from this analysis and what it means for Australia's electricity system. I'm presenting this afternoon on Transgrid's Energy Vision. This is the blueprint for the future of Australia's electricity system, and we've worked with CSIRO, ClimateWorks Australia, and the Brattle Group to develop and model 6 future scenarios for the future of Australia's electricity system. And really, this is an exciting time to be looking at the transformation of the electricity system and how the electricity sector and the transmission sector can enable the decarbonisation of the Australian economy and support the decarbonisation of the global economy through the production of green steel, green hydrogen, and other low-carbon services and products. In collaboration with CSIRO and ClimateWorks Australia, we developed 6 future scenarios for Australia's electricity system. I've mapped these out here on the chart, firstly along the spectrum of decarbonisation. So the further to the right, the stronger the future scenario decarbonises. Deep decarbonisation is the scenario where Australia does its fair share to hold global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. This means we hit net zero by 2035, not 2050. And it means that we do everything we can in terms of energy efficiency, renewable energy, electrification, and carbon offsetting to do a really strong decarbonisation of the Australian economy. The second scenario is prosumer power. The higher we go on this chart, the more rooftop solar there is in the electricity system. Prosumer power is a scenario where we absolutely max out the amount of rooftop solar on Australian homes. We have a huge amount of electric vehicles, behind-the-meter batteries, electric vehicles in vehicle-to-grid technology, virtual power plants, and really there's a strong coordination of the behind-the-meter resources. Clean energy superpower is a scenario that takes the assumptions from Australia's national hydrogen strategy. In this scenario, we become a global clean energy leader in the production of hydrogen and green steel. The size of the bubble on this chart represents the underlying electricity consumption in 2050. Clean energy superpower requires a 6 times growth in Australia's electricity consumption to supply electricity required for hydrogen and steel. In this scenario, we're exporters of a low carbon power system. Current trends is business as usual for the future of the Australian electricity system. States go it alone is a counterfactual to help us assess the difference in the electricity system if we couldn't build new interconnection between the states. And deindustrialization death spiral is a scenario where we have a huge contraction in Australia's energy system and production, industrial sector. We decline manufacturing in Australia by 50%, And this is really a scenario that stress tests what would happen if we had a huge economic recession and what would it mean to the electricity system. So firstly, decarbonisation. This chart looks at Australia's emissions trajectory to 2050 across the 6 scenarios. Current trends, which is really Australia's trajectory before the New South Wales government had their 50% emissions reduction ambition by 2030, and before the Australian government committed to net zero, we were on a 4-degree climate trajectory. There's only 2 scenarios, prosumer power and clean energy superpower, where we hold temperature rise to a 2-degree trajectory, and only 1 scenario, deep decarbonisation, where Australia does its fair share to hold global temperature rise to within 1.5 degrees, in line with the aspirations of the Paris Agreement. So some key insights from our analysis. The first one is that the transition to renewables is unstoppable. In 5 out of the 6 scenarios, renewable energy supplies more than 70% of the NEM's annual needs by 2035 and over 90% by 2050. It's clear that the transition towards renewables is going to be unstoppable, and it's really about how quickly we can transition towards renewables and ultimately away from coal. This chart on the next slide is the same chart as before, but I've now compared the NEM and New South Wales. This is the annual renewable energy generation share. And I've added the black dots, which is the federal government's recent emissions projections. And you can see, particularly in New South Wales, that the share of renewable energy is going to hit 84%, which is the black dot, very close to the deep decarbonisation scenario, which is the most ambitious scenario towards acting on climate change. And so the electricity sector is going to be moving rapidly in the next decade. It is really the opportunity to embrace renewable energy and set ourselves up to be a global clean energy leader. What's that going to mean in the electricity system? It's going to mean that the early retirement of coal is increasingly likely. This chart looks at the coal generation capacity, which are the grey lines, is what the Australian electricity market operator would say is the expected retirement of coal capacity to 2050. And the lines represent our 6 scenarios. It's clear that the early coal retirement is going to happen. In deep decarbonisation, which is in line for at least New South Wales with the federal government's emissions trajectory, coal is retired from the NEM by 2032. And in New South Wales, that's 2031. The early retirement of coal is seen across the vast majority of scenarios. It's about how we can quickly transition away from coal towards renewables. The International Energy Agency says that electrification is the single largest contributor to reaching net zero emissions. These charts, the first 2 on the left, look at the additional electricity consumption that's going to be required in the national electricity market because of electrification. Transport electrification, so particularly moving to electric vehicles in the passenger fleet, is going to lead to a huge growth in electricity consumption. The top of the deep decarbonisation line hits 100 terawatt hours in 2050. The NEM itself is only 190 terawatt hours. So this is a pretty big growth in electricity consumption that's going to come from electric vehicles. Industry and buildings is also going to have a growth in electricity consumption due to electrification. This is the lowest cost way to reduce emissions across the economy. Energy efficiency is fundamental, and this is going to lead to a reduction in electricity consumption. But what we can see is that the growth due to transport electrification and the growth due to industrial and building electrification is going to be greater than the decline in energy due to energy efficiency. So what this means, and I'll just share, what this means, is that we're going to see a significant growth in electricity consumption. If we become global clean energy leaders and support the development of a hydrogen industry, we're going to lead to a 6 times growth in electricity consumption. So these charts, the first one on the left represents the hydrogen requirements in the Australian electricity sector. And these are assumptions based on Australia's national hydrogen strategy. So Australia will produce 20 million tonnes of hydrogen in 2050. On the right is the outputs of our least cost optimization, showing the locations that are best able to produce the lowest cost hydrogen and green steel. We've also in our analysis assumed that there would be quite a bit of hydrogen steel making. Interestingly, in 2050, the cost of getting hydrogen to Japan, for example, will represent 2/3 of the total cost of hydrogen. Only 1/3 will come from producing the hydrogen, and 2/3 will come from transporting the hydrogen. And so the opportunity is to produce hydrogen domestically using Australian renewable energy to produce Australian hydrogen and Australian iron ore. Australia exports 67% of the world's iron ore, but we only export 0.3% of the world's steel. Now, the critical inputs to low carbon steel is hydrogen and iron ore, both of which we have abundance in Australia. The modelling on the right shows that Queensland, followed by New South Wales, has the best potential for large-scale, low-cost hydrogen and green steel. And this analysis is done optimising for port capacity and workforce availability. And it's really the opportunity is combining the abundant renewables with the fantastic port availability and workforce capacity to become a clean energy superpower and export green hydrogen and steel to the rest of the world. Now, I'm going to present some maps here of the national electricity market in 2030 and 2050. And I'll show how renewable energy grows in regional Australia and how transmission is absolutely vital to enable the sharing of this electricity to support the decarbonisation of the economy and ultimately to support Australia becoming a global clean energy leader. In 2030, we require a growth in renewable energy capacity, particularly in New South Wales, with transmission supporting interconnection between Victoria, South Australia and New South Wales. This grows in current trends, which is a 4-degree temperature trajectory, to include greater interconnection between the Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia areas. If we become a decarbonised economy, we quickly decarbonise the electricity system. In 2030, we'll require more renewable energy and more transmission to connect the regions. And that grows more significantly in 2050 under a 100% renewable energy scenario. This is where renewable energy connected and shared from transmission will be absolutely vital for the decarbonisation of our economy. And if we wanted to become a clean energy superpower, we need to develop these hydrogen and green steel, green aluminium industries. And that takes time, just like LNG took 30 years to become Australia's second largest export commodity. Again, we need to develop the hydrogen and green steel industries in Australia. And New South Wales and Queensland look like the least cost locations to do that. Now, if we are going to become a clean energy superpower, then we need a fundamental transformation of our energy system. You can see here these renewable energy zones become massive. We need extra power coming in from Central Australia to connect in total 374 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity into the load centres. And we need to be producing a huge amount of hydrogen around particularly Newcastle and Northern Queensland. This requires innovations in renewable energy, innovations in transmission, and really building a solid foundation for a hydrogen and green steel industry. It also makes us focus on social license, ensuring that we can create jobs in regional areas, ensuring that we can benefit regional communities, and that transmission of renewable energy is seen as a positive for communities, not a negative. So I presented the first slide, which showed the 6 scenarios. Now I presented the same scenarios, but instead of having decentralization vertically, I've swapped this out with electricity sector jobs, because our analysis looks at job creation, it looks at electricity prices, and it looks at decarbonisation. And these can all be found on Transgrid's website. If you search Energy Vision, you'll see our latest publication, and you'll also see all the data available. We really want to help promote a clean energy future. What we can see is that when we look at the 3, I suppose, success metrics of decarbonisation, electricity sector jobs, and electricity prices, we can really create a win-win-win for Australia. This is where we decarbonise our economy very strongly in the next 10 to 15 years, and we set ourselves up to become clean energy superpowers. And that's really a unique opportunity for Australia to embrace the clean energy revolution, and transmission is vital to support the decarbonisation of our economy and the decarbonisation of the global economy. I'd encourage you to visit the Transgrid website to read the Energy Vision, and I also thank you for your time this afternoon.
네, 발표 잘 들었습니다. 다음은 글로벌 컨설팅사인 PwC 호주 법인에서 인프라 분야를 담당하고 계신 데니 투만 님입니다. 호주 시장의 신재생 에너지 트렌드 및 기회에 대해서 들어보겠습니다.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Danny Toomer. I'm a partner at PwC. It's good to be with you here today. Unfortunately, we've gone virtual. We weren't able to do it in person, but hopefully next year we'll be meeting in person, and I really look forward to it. Today, we're here to talk to you about renewable energy, the opportunities, some of the projects that are available, and some of the trends that we're seeing. Before I do, I'll give you a little bit of background about myself and our team. I'm a partner. We look at 3 main sectors: energy, water, and waste, and included in that is carbon markets. Within energy, renewables, generation, storage, pumped hydro, batteries, hydrogen, and similar projects to that. Our team's 44 people. We do a lot of work in M&A and co-development. To give you an idea of some of the projects we've done, we were lead advisor for the Series A for Sun Cable, connecting Australia to Singapore with a subsea cable. We advised Reed Solar on Bungala, 300 megawatts in South Australia, as co-development partner and M&A advisor. With the lead advisor to Terrain Solar, we developed 6 projects with them and sold to Metka EGN, and looking at a new set of projects. Advised the Victorian government on their big battery, and finally, as an example, advised Federation on their listed takeover of WinLab. Before we go too much into the content, I first want to say thank you for Kotra for the invitation today, and thank you to my colleague Irene Lee for assisting with the preparation of the materials that you see. In this presentation, we'll take you through a few points. 1 is macro trends, the 2nd is micro trends, 3 is the opportunities, how to enter the market, and 4 is sharing a few of our experiences from M&A and development, things to look out for. We'll start with the macro trends. There's 5 trends that we've seen emerging in Australia, and no doubt many of you have seen these overseas. The first one is the ongoing net zero commitment, and this is both from large energy users in Australia and the result of some pretty positive news coming out of COP26. It looks like there'll be global recognition of a net zero goal by 2050, keeping in mind every government will be looking to do this a little bit differently. Along with that, there's certain states in Australia that are looking at what's called RES build-outs, and a RES is a renewable energy zone. Put very simply, it's a geographical electrical region which will really facilitate the fast tracking of renewable energy to be built, and that'll be a mix between solar, wind, potentially pumped hydro, and storage, and it'll be done by fast tracking planning, permitting, and also fast tracking key transmission that needs to be built. Along with that, we're seeing the phasing out of coal power stations. A lot of existing brownfield stations are having their end date moving closer to today, some jumping by as much as 10 years from when they were originally scheduled to close to today. And along with that, we'll see an increase in new generation coming to the market. EV take-up is emerging. There's been some federal and state policies that's been released in the last couple of weeks. We're seeing a significant interest and increase in this activity, but still quite off a low base, and hopefully it continues to grow. And then finally, in the last 18 to 24 months, it's been really significant from a hydrogen perspective across lots of different perspectives: mobility, export, and manufacturing. And we'll touch on that a little bit more throughout the presentation. One really big theme, and looking forward about the size of the opportunity, is the level of capacity that we're seeing come through for both wind and solar. If you look at where we are today, just a bit over 10,000 megawatts of capacity in the network, expecting to grow year on year, up to in excess of 40 gigawatts of capacity leading to 2040, 2042. A few points we want to call out on this slide. Number one is, as you see the ramp up over time, you see a significant step change around the late 2020s, early 2030s, and a big driver of that is the closure of some of the coal plants. And depending on the actual date that these close, you're going to get this growth come forward, as well as the implementation of the renewable energy zones will really accelerate the uptake of renewables throughout our network. Final point on this slide is this is based on a base case or central case from AEMO, the 2020 ISP. There are other cases which have significantly more renewable energy coming through, including the hydrogen economy or hydrogen superpower, which would be, from memory, almost double this level of renewable generation entering into the market. We'll turn to the next slide, micro trends. So in here, it's very specific things that we're seeing within the broader renewable energy market, and things that will influence investment depending on how you want to play in the market. So we'll turn to the first one, increased uptake in corporate PPAs. Over the last few years, we've seen significant interest from corporates looking to decarbonise and be 100% renewable, entering into corporate PPAs. 2017 was a really big year. About 1,400 megawatts of capacity was written for corporate PPAs, and a big mix between governments, technology companies, materials and resources, consumer staples, infrastructure, and then a residual. After that really big buying, it slowed down a little bit in 2018 and then picked back up through 2019 and 2020. And again, to look at who's buying, it's quite broad and quite diverse, and it's a mix between technology companies, supermarkets, resource entities, office buildings. And what doesn't come up through here, but we see a trend coming, is more group buying. So entities that might not be able to buy, say, 100 megawatts of capacity because they're not huge energy users, are looking to come together, and there might be 10 buyers of 5 megawatts each that are happy to enter into an arrangement with a solar farm or a wind farm or a battery combination. Also, what's not shown here, and we're seeing it certainly emerge, is a new wave of complexity in corporate PPAs, which lends the way to large players owning the generation in Australia. And by complexity, what we mean is a real mix between wind and solar and batteries in different jurisdictions being used together to create a single PPA, where traditionally in, say, 2017 and earlier, it might have been single technology PPA coming through. So you'd buy the offtake only from a wind farm or only from a solar farm in one particular location. We're seeing this moving away. Those PPAs still exist, but you're also seeing the emergence of a more firm kind of load coming through, or a multi-technology, multi-jurisdiction product being created by asset owners that might own different generation in different locations. The final piece on that slide is we're seeing really significant interest from governments and government auction programs coming through. The most significant is in New South Wales, called LTESA, Long-Term Energy Supply Agreements, essentially 20-year contracts. There's a bit of complexity there that'll be rolled out over a number of years to hit some pretty lofty targets we have here in New South Wales in terms of renewable energy. And that feeds into the renewable energy zone part I spoke about a little bit earlier. And there are similar arrangements being looked at in different states as well. So no shortage of potential auctions coming up for renewable energy in Australia. This is quite interesting, having co-developed a lot of projects as a team here at PwC. And what we've seen from 2017 up to 2020 is development has become a little bit harder and it's become a little bit more expensive. And that feeds through in the data. And this is just one snapshot where we saw the average duration between development approval being received, the land permitting, and financial close occurring for large-scale projects increasing from around 1.7 years in 2017 to 2.3 years in 2020. And that increase was for a couple of reasons. Reason one, development has become much more expensive and the type of people developing has changed a bit, and that's slowing it down. Reason two, offtake has become a little bit trickier, although we touched on it on the previous slide. We see a lot more coming through in the next couple of years. And three, the ability to connect to the grid has become more challenging over the last few years. As we had an initial wave of projects connect in, the grid's becoming a little less available for new projects to connect in really good locations. And to combat that, we're seeing these renewable energy zones being built, and it's just a matter of time before these things come together to continue the successful development of renewables in Australia. In light of these challenges that we've seen and the delay or the slowdown and cost increase to develop renewables in Australia, at the same time, we've seen the emergence of some really strategic investors enter into the Australian renewable energy market. And to give you a couple of data points on that, from 2017 to 18 year to 2019-2020, the share of oil and gas investment grew 7 times in renewable energy projects in Australia. And paired with that, we saw the proportion of projects that achieved financial close that were owned by strategic investors increasing from 70% to 78% between the years 2017 to 2020. And this is a trend we see that's going to continue. The emergence of really large, significant strategic investors, and they might be infrastructure funds, they might be utilities, they might be oil and gas companies, they might be large industrials or manufacturers looking to take positions in renewable energies. Renewable energy really becoming dominant in Australia, and they're becoming dominant in different ways. And we'll touch on the potential opportunities they're looking at and how you can enter the market as well soon. I'll take us to the next part, how to enter the market. There's 5 ways we see often new entrants look to come into Australia renewable energy market. The first is buying greenfield, and you can buy from very, very early stage up to a project that's ready to build. Still a lot of interest in these types of projects, a little bit of frustration sometimes because they're one-off projects and a lot of work and diligence goes into that, but nonetheless a good way to enter. Number 2, we've seen a lot of this in the last 12, 18 months and expect to still see a lot of this in the next 12, 18 months, is buying brownfield assets. There's been a lot of transactions recently the sale of wind farms, solar farms, portfolios as well. And two types of assets, really, ones that are a little bit older and ones that were built in the last 2-3 years and coming to market now, more de-risked, and there's a fair bit of interest in these types of assets. The third and fourth can link together. The third is buying a developer. And when you buy a developer, there's two paths. You can buy the entire developer, you can buy a part of the developer, or you could buy the pipeline of the developer. A lot of interest emerging in this type of transaction for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of incoming investors are looking to buy more than just one asset, and they see this as an opportunity to grab onto local expertise, put money in if money is what's needed to accelerate the development, and get megawatts into the ground. Linked to this is buying a pipeline, and you can buy a pipeline standalone from a developer. You can buy a pipeline by milestone payments with a developer, or you can buy the developer with the pipeline that that developer would have, and putting that together, build out the megawatts that could go into the ground. The last one, which we do see occasionally from incoming investors, is to self-develop. So start from scratch, secure the land, build a team and a presence in Australia, and either retain that team and get megawatts into the ground, or look to eventually sell that team to a third party as part of your expansion plans, or have co-development into it. With this in mind, we wanted to share just a few things we're seeing in terms of cost curves, because it does influence pretty heavily the decisions people are making, both from a development and offtake perspective. The two we really wanted to show here is, one, the cost of lithium-ion batteries and the outlook for pricing. As you see on the left-hand side, pretty significant declines in the last 10 years, from around $1,800 a kilowatt hour. So now we're seeing under $400, and expect that to continue to fall and flatten towards 2030. And this will do a couple of things. One, it'll influence the way people approach development in Australia. Two, it'll influence the way M&A valuations are undertaken, particularly with forecast electricity pricing. And three, it's going to influence the way offtake is done in Australia. And there's always a lot of debate about energy only or energy plus storage, but we expect both types of products to continue to play out, as we discussed a little bit earlier. The other thing I wanted to call out on this slide is the build cost of pumped hydro, batteries, and gas turbines, and the outlook. And as you can see, batteries still have a really significant price drop in the forecast, where the other technologies seem to have flattened out, which reflects the maturity of those. Nonetheless, we acknowledge there's different technologies for different uses, and different government policies are pushing to have different types of generation storage coming through, and it'll be quite interesting in the next couple of years which ones come through and where they come through in the network. We'll go to our next slide. Hydrogen export. There's a really big push in Australia to become a hydrogen export leader. We see ourselves as quite cost competitive, both from an export perspective and also domestic production and use perspective. And we see this competitiveness from a couple of perspectives, or a couple of different thoughts. Number one is the irradiance here, if we're talking solar or the wind speeds. Two is our access to land, which is really good for renewable energy production. Three is the bilateral relations we have with countries like Korea. We see long-term partnerships already existing from our LNG production and export, and see the ability to utilize that long-term relationship to convert that into a hydrogen export industry. And fourth, we see the cost falling significantly in terms of the equipment that goes into the production for hydrogen, and ongoing support from our governments, which will push this industry forward. I'll take us to our next section now. Key considerations. Having done a lot of M&A as a team and co-development, there are always things to watch out for, and we'll touch on these briefly now. Number one, regulation on the left-hand side. As our market moves from being very fossil fuel focused to renewable focused, the regulation is changing and catching up in some areas, and sometimes you do have unexpected consequences of this regulation change in certain projects or certain regions. Overall, it's very positive, but just something to watch out for as you make an investment to make sure you understand the prevailing regulation, either in that state or that part of the electricity network. Number 2 is technology, and the technology improvements are driving down the price of energy generation and storage quite significantly. And this is supporting the build out of renewable energy projects, but having a good, strong understanding of where the forecast technology costs are going to go is key in your investment making, depending which path you take, and also key on understanding what the future electricity price might be for any investment that you make. Number 3, grid congestion. And we talked a little bit about this when we saw the dates or the timing it takes to get to financial close from 2017 to 2020 increasing. A big part of that was grid. We've experienced a little bit of grid congestion in Australia as we've been transitioning. And that's essentially power is being produced but can't get to where it needs to go because of the structure of the grid. There's significant investment happening across Australia in reinforcing the grid, as well as policy change, such as the renewable energy zones that we talked about previously. In terms of project-specific risks or things to look out for, MLF and merchant curve forecasts are really material in your valuations. We'd be very happy to speak to you about how they work and how they link together, but put very simply, they both drive revenue materially and both are project specific. And the underlying assumptions and understanding the market is really key to forming a strong view. 2 is the direction of PPAs and how you'd like to approach your investment thesis. We are seeing a little bit of a move away from projects being 100% contracted to being 50+% contracted, and even a few that are a little bit less. And the big drive has been twofold. 1, investors see it as more profitable to have some merchant exposure. And 2, there's been an acceptance from project finance banks to not have to be 100% contracted, and it's okay to be a little bit less. It matters depending on the contract type you have, the jurisdiction you're in, and the technology, but nonetheless, we're seeing a trend towards that. And also there's a premium being paid for firm and shape PPA supply. And again, this is the mix of technology and jurisdiction and the offers that you can make to your customers. Finally is financing. I touched on it just then. A final part to add, we're seeing a lot of interest in portfolios and also portfolio financing. So not necessarily one-off asset finance, but maybe over 3 or 4 different assets which maximize or optimize the portfolio financing and the project returns which you're able to achieve. I'll take us to the next slide. I just wanted to say thank you again for all of you. Sorry we couldn't be here together in person. Thank you again to Kotra, and a final thank you to Irene Lee for assisting with this presentation. Our details are on the front slide. We'd love to get in contact with you. We're available. Have a good afternoon.
네, 데니 투마님 발표 감사합니다. 이상으로 2번째 세션을 통해 호주 시장의 유망 그린 산업에 대해 살펴보았습니다. 다음은 3번째 세션으로 넘어가겠습니다. 한국의 우수한 수소 분야 중소기업들에 대해 알아보는 시간입니다. 먼저 엘캠텍의 문상봉 대표님께서 엘캠텍에 대한 소개와 함께 그린 수소 생산 기술의 현재와 향후 전망이라는 주제에 대해 발표해 주시겠습니다.
안녕하세요. 저는 엘캠텍 대표이사로 있는 문상봉입니다. 저는 오늘 한국의 현재 그린 수소의 생산 기술 현황에 대해서 그리고 그 향후 전망에 대해서 말씀드리겠습니다. 목차는 한국에서의 그린 수소 동향과 그다음에 엘캠텍을 중심으로 한 펨 수선의 기술의 현황, 마지막으로 호주와 한국 간의 협업 관계로 정리를 하겠습니다. 잘 아시겠지만 전 세계는 그 그린 수소에 대한 이슈가 좀 큽니다. 그 그린 이슈를 갖다 촉발한 것은 지구 온난화와 이에 따른 그 전 세계가 넷제로를 향해서 가고 있습니다. 이 넷제로를 향한 그 여러 가지 방법들이 있겠지만 그중 가장 우수한 대안으로는 수소 경제가 가장 그 바람직하다고 볼 수가 있겠습니다. 그 수소 경제를 갖다가 이루는 가장 핵심적인 기술은 그린 수소 생산 기술이 되겠습니다. 그린 수소 기술은 그 재생에너지로부터 물을 가지고 전기 분해를 해서 수소를 생산하는 방식이 되겠습니다. 이와 같은 그린 수소 또는 그 P2G 개념은 그 독일에서 처음 시작되어 전 세계로 확장돼 가고 있습니다. 그린 수소를 가지는 전체에 대한 산업군을 살펴보면은 재생에너지로부터 간헐적 물 전기 분해를 통해서 수소를 만든 다음에 다양한 방식의 저장과 수송, 이용 분야로 이렇게 확산되는 모델을 가지고 있습니다. 기본적인 특징은 대부분의 기술은 기존에 있는 산업 기술을 스케일 다운 해가지고 이용하는 기술이 되겠고 여기에 예외적으로 물 전기 분해와 연료 전지는 새롭게 개발되는 분야가 되겠습니다. 우리나라의 그 그린 수소 이슈에 대해서 잠깐 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. 우리나라는 지역적 특성상 반도 국가지만 북한과의 교역이 없는 관계로 섬과 같은 고립된 특성을 가지고 있습니다. 우리나라는 그 2019년에 수소 경제에 대한 로드맵을 발표하였고 이 부분에 대한 대부분에 대한 방향은 수소 모빌리티 쪽에 집중이 되어 있습니다. 최근 그 2021년에 카본 뉴트럴 로드맵을 발표하였는데 이때 이제 우리나라 정부는 그 수소 칼라에 대해서 이제 고민을 좀 하고 있습니다. 그린 수소와 관련한 우리나라에서의 수선의 플레이어를 소개하자면 펜 관련 분야에 엘켄텍이 있고 알칼라인엔 대표적인 회사가 수소에너젠과 EM솔루션 회사가 있습니다. 그다음에 그 최근에 그 수전해로 개발하는 회사로는 그 한화가 AEM 분야에 이제 그 실험실 수준의 개발을 하고 있습니다. 국가연구소 쪽으로는 키스트에서 팸 관련된 소재들을 개발하고 있고, KIER에서는 알칼라인 중심으로 부품 소재들을 개발하고 있습니다. 주로 그린 수소로 만든 수소는 대부분 모빌리티라든가 연료전지, 파워, 그다음에 메탄 합성 분야에 제한되어 있습니다. 대부분의 다 정부 프로젝트로 진행이 되고 있고 정부 프로젝트로 잠깐 소개하면은 스마트 그리드 그 프로젝트의 1메가와트, 모빌리티 스테이션 쪽으로 3메가와트, 메탄 합성 쪽으로 2메가와트, 모바일 파워 시스템이 0.1메가와트, 최근에는 옵쇼어 그린 수소 생산 쪽으로도 피지빌리티 스터디가 되고 있습니다. 여기서 주요한 특징은 알칼라인과 팸을 동등한 규모로 그 평가를 진행하고 있습니다. 그러면은 엘켄텍에서 현재 수행하고 있는 팸 수전의 기술에 대해서 소개하고자 합니다. 저희 엘켄텍은 청정 에너지를 위한 안전하고 혁신적인 솔루션을 제공하는 것을 목표로 하고 있으며 엘켄텍은 수소 응용 분야에 적합한 팸 수전의 기술을 공급합니다. 엘켄텍이 가지고 있는 핵심 기술을 살펴보면은 소재부터 그러니까 멤브레인, 촉매, 이를 이용한 MEA 그리고 MEA를 적용한 수전의 스택, 그 다음에 시스템과 같은 머티리얼부터 엔지니어링까지 기술을 확보해 가고 있습니다. 수전의 기술에 있어서 가장 중요한 부분은 오펙스와 케이펙스를 갖다가 개선하는 부분인데 오펙스를 감소시키기 위해서 스택의 효율을 개선하는 연구가 진행되고 있으며 또한 그 스택의 스케일은 현재 1메가와트 수준에 있습니다. 오퍼레이팅 레인지는 현재 0.2 암페어 퍼 스퀘어 센티미터에서 금년도에 이제 한 4암페어까지 변동 범위를 갖도록 수전의 스택을 개발하였습니다. 또한 케이펙스를 갖다가 줄이기 위해서 중점을 두는 부분은 현재 촉매 사용량을 한 10분의 1 정도까지 줄인 이런 그 기술을 확보하였으며 핵심적인 내용은 촉매 자체를 쓰는 것이 아니고 담체 위에 촉매를 사용하여서 촉매 사용량을 혁신적으로 줄이는 노력을 하고 있습니다. 또한 저희 회사가 가지고 있는 특징 중에 하나는 셀 스택의 면적을 3,000 스퀘어 센티미터로 반기 면적을 가져가고 있습니다. 이 3,000 스퀘어 센티미터는 보다 나중에 스태킹과 스택의 확장성을 확보하기 위해서 기본 단위로 3,000 스퀘어 센티미터로 기술을 확보하였습니다. 현재 엘캠텍에서는 1메가와트 수준의 기술을 가지고 있지만 2023년에는 2.5메가와트, 2025년에는 5메가와트 수준으로 확대할 예정입니다. 금년 말까지는 현재 스택 100개를 생산하는 양산 설비를 갖춰가고 있으며 또한 기술적으로도 MEA 코팅 프로세스를 혁신적으로 개선해가고 있습니다. 또한 시스템 분야에 있어서는 100메가와트 플랜트를 디자인하고 있습니다. 금년 말까지 완결을 할 예정입니다. 다음 슬라이드는 100메가와트 셀 룸에 대한 디자인입니다. 이와 같은 2층 구조를 가지는 셀 스택 설계를 가지고 있으며 하단부에는 유틸리티 부분, 상단부에는 전해조 룸 이와 같은 디자인을 하여 공간을 갖다가 컴팩트하게 디자인하는 디자인 방식을 취하고 있습니다. 그러면 호주와 한국과의 협업 관계에 대해서 잠깐 의견을 말씀드리겠습니다. 한국은 그린 수소 생산이 경제성이 있는가 이런 관점에서 봤을 때 한국은 전기값이 1kg에 호주 달러로 0.137 그럴 때 이제 수소 가격이 대충 호주 달러로 9.16달러를 가지게 됩니다. 그 다음에 이와 같은 가격은 리포머로 만든 수소 가격이 한 1.5배가 되어 매우 경쟁력이 없더라고 볼 수가 있습니다. 그 다음에 현재 한국의 재생전원으로부터 얻게 되는 잉여 전력 문제는 심각하지 않습니다. 물론 이제 특정 지역인 제주 지역을 빼고는 아직 심각한 문제를 가지고 있지 않습니다. 결론적으로 말씀드리고자 하는 것은 한국에서 그린 수소를 생산하는 것은 좀 경제성이 없다라고 말씀드릴 수가 있겠습니다. 그러면 한국에서는 과연 어떤 전략을 취해야 하는가? 한국의 그린 수소 로드맵에 의하면은 한국의 수소가 절대적으로 많이 부족하고 그래서 외국으로부터 이제 수입해야 하는 특성을 가지고 있습니다. 한국은 상대적으로 수요가 큰 반면에 생산 능력은 상대적으로 낮기 때문에 수소 결핍 지역이 되겠고 이에 반해서 호주는 수소 수요에 비해서 상대적으로 많은 생산 가능성을 갖다가 가지고 있습니다. 따라서 호주의 풍부한 자원을 이용할 수 있으면 좋은 협업 모델이 될 수 있을 거라고 생각이 됩니다. 제가 준비한 자료는 여기까지입니다. 감사합니다.
발표 감사드립니다, 대표님. 다음은 하이리움 산업의 김서영 대표님께서 기업 소개와 함께 하이리움 산업의 미래 수소 모빌리티 전망에 대해 발표해 주시겠습니다.
I'm Soyoung Kim, the CEO of Hylium Industry. Today, I'm going to introduce my company about our activities relating to hydrogen business. Thank you. We are a spin-off venture company from Korean National Research Lab, KIST. So we are currently developing and manufacturing liquid hydrogen tanks and liquid hydrogen powder drones and refueling stations. So we are the independent developer of liquid hydrogen technology in Korea. So based on the government R&D research fund. So when we work for Korean National Lab KIST, we developed a compact hydrogen liquefier and liquid hydrogen storage vessels and drone powers using liquid hydrogen. And also, we have developed the hydrogen sensing silicon and some kind of a passive hydrogen leak detecting technologies. I'm going to tell you about the hydrogen energy density compared to the conventional fuels. As you can see here, the hydrogen is showing much higher energy density than the conventional diesel, gasoline, something like that, the fossil fuels. So 4 times higher energy density. And liquid hydrogen, comparing to the high pressure gas hydrogen, liquid hydrogen shows almost 2 times higher energy density than the high pressure gas hydrogen. That's why we totally focus on the liquid hydrogen technologies in my company. So we are currently solving that hydrogen safety issue and the inefficiency issues related to high pressure gas hydrogen using liquid hydrogen. So the liquid hydrogen has the highest energy density per weight actually in the universe. So by using this liquid hydrogen, we can have much safer environment, because the liquid hydrogen normally stored and then transported at a low pressure, less than 3 bar. So we can provide much safer environment. And also using liquid hydrogen, we can substantially reduce the storage and then transportation cost. High-Limit is currently focusing on 2 major products. One is that liquid hydrogen powered drones and mobile hydrogen refilling station. So currently we are holding patents on the liquid hydrogen drone power packs and hydrogen refilling station and so forth. And currently we have 26 patents registered and 29 patents on the examination. Okay, I would like to show you some of our key technologies. So in 2015, we received Russell Scott Memorial Award from the U.S. Cryogenic Institute and relating to small capacity compact hydrogen liquefiers. So currently we are going to install first hydrogen liquefier in South Korea by next February. And also we have developed a world lightest liquid hydrogen tank that is much lighter than the conventional high pressure gas tank, as well as the much lighter than the liquid hydrogen tank developed in BMW 10 years ago. So that is perfect solution for aviation industry, like drones and UAM. So we are currently providing some prototype liquid hydrogen tank to our aerospace customers worldwide. In order to provide our liquid hydrogen tank to the customers worldwide, we currently are holding the American US certification for liquid tank, and also certification for European regions, and also we have KGS, Korean certification for the tanks. Okay, let me briefly introduce the liquid hydrogen powered drones we are currently developing and currently selling. As you know that the drones are currently widely used in many various industrial fields, like the infrastructure, delivery, and air taxi, something like that. But all drones requires a long endurance flight time. So that's why we developed liquid hydrogen powers. And as you can see here, the drone market is growing fast. And infrastructure market and agriculture market is pretty big to use the long flight drone solution. So we have developed the liquid hydrogen power packs, which has ultralight liquid tank as well as the PEM fuel cells system. So it can provide much longer endurance time, or about 10 times longer flight time than common lithium batteries. So you may ask, how could Hylium's liquid hydrogen power can provide us such a long flight endurance? The answer is simple. As you can see here, liquid hydrogen has the highest energy density per weight, as I mentioned. So the common lithium polymer batteries is just showing about 200 watt-hour per kilogram energy density, but liquid hydrogen can provide up to 10,000 watt-hour per kilogram, such high energy density. That's why we can provide long flight time. So we believe this is the best solution for military, police, firefighting, construction, inspection, agriculture, delivery, something like that. Common commercial lithium battery powered drones just flies 20 minutes with the heavy lithium batteries. But our solution with liquid hydrogen can fly more than 4 hours. So we have some competitors who are using the high pressure gas tank. They normally flies for 2 hours. So our liquid power, hydrogen power, can provide a much longer flight time. Okay, so let me show you some of our the customers, and we are providing prototype liquid hydrogen tank and refueling solutions to the Airtex company in the United States. So they are currently developing the 4 passenger seat UAM. So our liquid hydrogen tank can be used effectively in their system. Also, we have many customers in various automotive field, including other mobility field. So we are also providing compact ultralight drone tank to French industry, and also we are providing prototype liquid hydrogen tanks to the Hyundai Motors and the Volvo trucks. And also recently we are developing the liquid hydrogen tank for ocean vessel to UK company. Okay, let me also briefly introduce our mobile hydrogen refueling station. We have developed the prototype refueling station 3 years ago, and currently we are testing every day and upgrading our refueling technologies. As you know, the hydrogen fuel cell vehicles are being widely used in Asian regions and in the United States and the European regions. So also including in Australia. So to enhance the hydrogen fuel cell vehicle market, we absolutely need the hydrogen refueling infrastructure. So that's why we have developed mobile solution for refueling. And also, as you know, that the many countries have very ambitious plan to build the HRS, hydrogen refueling station, near future. But one refueling station costs more than $2 million. So it's a huge capex investment that they require. So that's why we introduced the mobile solution. So one mobile solution can provide the refueling service wider regions. So our first prototype can carry up to 7,500 liters of liquid hydrogen, and also we have on board the liquid hydrogen pump, high pressure pump. So our mobile refueling station can refuel up to 100 vehicles a day. And this solution can provide much lower capex and opex comparing to the ground, the HRS system. So we have this mobile solution. Mobile refueling station has very key components, everything on board, and which is, as you can see here, basically we need a liquid hydrogen storage tank, and also we need high pressure liquid hydrogen pump, and also we need a vaporizer, gasifier, and then small buffer tanks and the dispenser. Then we can provide high pressure gas refueling to Nexo and Mirais. This is the overall schema we have inside at our mobile refueling station. So we have some customers here, and we are developing mobile solutions for Volvo construction equipment in Sweden, and also we are discussing about the mobile solution development with Nikola Motors in the United States. Okay, let me show you some activities we are doing in South Korea. So we have introduced our key technologies, including liquefaction, storage, and hydrogen-powered drones, and refueling station. So in 2019, we introduced the liquid hydrogen powered drone to current Korean President, Mr. Moon, and also Gangwon Province Governor, Mr. Choi. And currently, liquid hydrogen powered drone, several units are being used in Gangwon Province for firefighting and the fire the detection. And last year, we concluded MOU with Hyosung, that heavy industry, to build Korea's first liquid hydrogen refueling station in Daegwallyeong, it's Gangwon Province. And also we concluded MOU with Korea Trailer to build Korea's first tank trailers to transport liquid hydrogen from 2023. And also we are partnering with SK Gas to transform their current LPG gas station to the hydrogen refueling station near future. We have received some award from the KBS startup competition, and also our development contribution was acknowledged by Korean Prime Minister and Gangwon Province Governor. So we got very honorable award from many institutes in South Korea. Okay, that's all I have today, and thanks so much for your attention. Okay, thank you.
발표 감사드립니다, 대표님. 이상으로 한국과 호주의 수소 신재생 에너지 현황뿐만 아니라 다양한 기업들의 사례들도 살펴보았습니다. 잠시 후 호주 시간 오후 3시, 한국 시간 오후 1시부터 한국과 호주의 그린 산업 투자 기회에 대해 알아보는 네 번째 세션을 시작하겠습니다. 잠시 후에 뵙겠습니다.